Hi, everyone. My name is Renata Williams. I am the Assistant Dean of Engagement and Inclusion and the Director of Intercultural Affairs. My pronouns are she, her, hers. We are here with you today because Caitlin and Tori asked us if we would engage with you a little bit. And the best way we knew how to do this right now was through a video. Tyler.
Hi, everyone. I am so glad that you are here and that you are a residential assistant here on campus, and you have a great opportunity to really serve the students here. So I hope that you can enjoy this presentation. My name is Tyler Cox, and I am the Associate Director of Intercultural Affairs and Inclusive Programming. And yeah, I'm thankful that you're here, and hopefully you learned something new in the presentation. So I'm going to screen share here, and we'll open up a slideshow. We have a few videos as well, so it's a little bit more interactive. And we also have an activity that we want you to do on your own, wherever you are, and we're going to participate and do that as well. So we will start here and get our presentation up. So the basis of this presentation mainly is to go over some basic terms and also some action steps, what you can do as an RA to increase and promote inclusivity on campus.
I think in addition to that, we always want you to know that, yes, we'll give you this information, we'll share information with you, but please know that you always have us as a resource. So sometimes if that means, well, this year, rather than a closed door conversation, maybe a Zoom call with one of us individually, so you can talk through something that you may have experienced on your hall or something that you have an additional question about, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. That's what we're here for. And we really do enjoy seeing you all grow in this area. And so that gives us joy.
Great. So diversity and inclusion is our first kind of vocab thing right here. With our office title, we are not the Office of Diversity. We are not the Office of Multicultural Affairs. We are the Office of Intercultural Affairs and Inclusive Programming. It's a long office title, but it's really important to designate that difference between diversity and inclusion. A good way I like to explain it is diversity is what admissions and what human resources do in getting students here on campus and hiring faculty and staff. Hopefully that student body and those faculty and staff come from diverse backgrounds. It's not just about race, it's also about religion, sexual orientation, background, socioeconomic status. There's so many factors that play into it. That's admissions and HR. That's how I think about it. And then inclusion is what we do. Not just Renata and I in our office, but also you as an RA. You create an inclusive environment. And we all should be doing that, not just RAs, not just our office, but everyone here on campus creates an inclusive environment.
Such a perfect way to break it down, Tyler. Thank you for that. Because that's really basic. That's the most basic premise that we're trying to talk about today. Diversity is about the what or the who, the composition or makeup of a particular space. This might include demographics like race, ethnicity, veteran status, ability, sexual orientation, those different things. It's about the what or who. And then the inclusion piece is about the how. How have we prepared our spaces? How have we prepared our campus community to be affirming, to be beyond accepting and well beyond tolerant, right? So that everyone can thrive in these spaces, in our space, that is LVC.
Exactly. So this, I skipped ahead here. This next slide goes over some instances of where diversity and inclusion and also equity can be. So imagine yourself going into a party or going into a room or having a conversation. Diversity is who's invited to that party, who's in the room, and how many different voices are there. That's the basic. Inclusion is active participation. So if you're at a party and it's a pretty diverse party, there's people from all different social circles, that's great. But are the different social circles being included? Are they being invited to dance? Are they given a seat at the table to have pizza with everyone else? Are they being listened to when they're having a discussion? It's the active part that's the inclusion.
And so we won't insult your intelligence. You can read through these slides on your own, but this really designates that difference between diversity, inclusion, and then equity for you. The one piece that we will read for you, we know that there's a lot of pieces that really resonate and that really drill down a little bit further so you can engage in the conversation and do some reflective thinking about what it means for you, the work that you do, how you interact with your peers, and etc. Equity is a condition of fair, inclusive, and respectful treatment that recognizes and acknowledges differing needs and expectations. Equity acknowledges the fact that equal treatment does not always yield results. So the way that I can think about this, through the Office of Intercultural Affairs, there's something called the Multicultural Fellowship. And so often, students have asked, like, why do I not qualify for the Multicultural Fellowship? There's differences in needs sometimes, or things of that nature that really just, if we were across the board to give everyone the money, it may not benefit in the same way sometimes when you or have a different scholarship range. So even beyond the Multicultural Fellowship, so every student that applies to school, if we just said everybody gets $5,000, everybody that applies to LVC, that might not benefit the student that has a 0 estimated family contribution the way that it benefits a student that has a $50,000 estimated family contribution. I hope that makes sense. And so broadening it beyond even the Multicultural Fellowship, that's across the board when we talk about, equity versus equality in anything that we do. So many of you may have seen the little cartoon that has the kids standing on the box. So it's everybody at first gets the same box, but it's still the person who's the smallest can't see over the fence, right? But then when you give the person that's the tallest no box, and the person that's the next tallest maybe 1 box, and then that third person that's the shortest in the group 2 boxes, we didn't give everyone the same thing, but we make sure that we're doing our best to level the playing field.
That's the difference between equality and equity. That's a difference that I've only learned recently, honestly. I think people use them interchangeably, just like diversity and inclusion. People kind of use them together, but they are different. Equity is about making sure that people have the same experience, being able to view the baseball game. Equality is giving everybody the same thing, and that's the difference. And there's instances where one could be used and one maybe couldn't be used, but that's the difference in it. And hopefully that makes sense to you all. So what is privilege? What is social capital? These are things that have definitely been thrown around a lot in media. We hear the term white privilege a lot. There's male privilege. What is privilege? What is social capital? So we have a little bit of a video, but did you want to talk a little bit about kind of the basic definitions of that, Renata, before we go into the video?
Sure. So privilege does not speak to anything regarding knowing folks' background necessarily, or knowing how you grew up, because sometimes the word privilege can really put people on the defense. We're not trying to do that. When we talk about the word privilege, it's simply someone's inability to be able to identify with a situation because they will never have to experience it. That's really what privilege speaks to. Not saying that any person grew up with a silver spoon in their mouth, not saying that any person grew up with all of the resources necessary, because we quite frankly know that might not be the case. But that privilege speaks to the idea that you might not be able to identify with a particular thing because you may never, ever have to experience it. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about privilege. Social capital, we all have it. I'll say that. We all have social capital, and we have it to varying degrees. I think the video really drills down when we're talking about social capital, and I think he does an awesome job explaining it in the video. So I'll let him explain it, and I hope you'll engage us, because we'll send a questionnaire afterwards, but I hope you'll engage us with some questions about that after.
Exactly. And just going back to the example we gave before about, watching the baseball game over the wall. The tall person has the privilege to be able to do that just by themselves. They have that privilege to be able to see over the wall and watch the game, whereas the shorter person does not have that privilege. So that's maybe using that example is a bit more clear for you. So I'm going to stop share and then open up this video here, and we'll go into that. So hopefully you all can see this, and we'll get started.
Some time ago, I was speaking at a corporate event in America. I was the guest speaker. that night at dinner, I was at a table full of white people, and the guy, one of the bosses who'd invited me, actually started to tell a joke that I knew straight away was going to be racial. And black people were going to be the butt of the joke. In those split seconds in the early sentences of the joke, I had a decision to make. Do I say something or stay quiet? No one else was saying anything, but I'm sure they felt uncomfortable. So I spoke up and I said, I don't think this joke is one I want to hear. I don't like the way it's going. I think it's going to be at the expense of black people. I'm not comfortable with that. Would you mind not telling it? Or I could leave the table. It was very uncomfortable. I remember he didn't tell the joke, but it was uncomfortable the rest of the night. Later in my room, I journaled what I felt about what was going on. I thought two things were at play. One was what I would call white solidarity. The other was what I would call white social capital. White solidarity is an unspoken code, I think, that we have as white people that means we would never embarrass each other by creating a racial discomfort for each other, by interrupting a racist joke or pointing out a act of prejudice or discrimination. We cannot keep quiet because it's a social code that we have, that we would remain in solidarity with each other, which protects our whiteness, our white advantage, our white privilege. That was at play at the table that night that allowed him to do what he'd done obviously many times. White social capital is what you get if you stay quiet. You get included, you are one of the boys, you are an insider, you are good to be around, you're a team player, you're fun, which may give you opportunities of inclusion as well in a corporate setting, a business setting, a social setting. It is an accruing of white capital by going along with it. I want to say to my white friends listening to this that our silence at those times is not benign, it is malignant, because we become complicit in the continuation of the racist joke telling. It gets told again and again because when we heard it, we didn't say anything. And as socially awkward as it is, and knowing you'll be penalized if you say something, I'm appealing to us, because millions of us every day have this opportunity to say something, to speak up, to stand up for people of color and black people. And you will be excluded and you will lose social capital, but you will be a champion of a cause that you wish someone had been for you at times in your life. And I think many of us feel we can't do anything at the large government level. We can't protest on the streets. We don't feel comfortable with this or that. Can you say something today, wherever you are in your life? Can you speak up? Because our silence is not benign. It is continuing the problem. We can all play a part like this every single day. Let's speak up. Let's play our part, is what I'm appealing for. Love you guys. Thank you. Some time ago, I was speaking at a corporate event in America. I was the guest speaker.
That's a little bit about social capital and, white solidarity and how you can be an active ally to other groups. And that's a crucial part in creating a better community here on campus. I'm personally really exhausted and tired of apathy, of people not caring about other people who are in different groups. And so, yes, I identify as gay. And yes, I do have a strong sense of passion for the LGBTQ community, but that's not where my passion ends. I also have a passion for communities of color, for low-income students, for first-generation students, for other students, other groups. I don't just care about my own group, and I don't just care about promoting my own group. And I encourage you all to do that. Not just think about your own group, but think about other groups as well. That's why my pin has a black and brown stripe on it too, because it's not just about sexuality. There's also race, and creating a unified campus is so important with that.
Tyler hit the nail on the head. So while this video specifically talks about race, when you can be a champion for so many other groups of people that you may not belong to. So whether it's the LGBTQ community, whether it's a lower income family, like group from a lower socioeconomic status. It runs the gamut, whether it's someone who is differently abled. So all of these things come into play, and we really ask you to think about those things as you continue your work as a residential assistant, and how that plays out in your halls, how that plays out in conversations that you hear, right? So sometimes people will say something and they don't think that you heard it, or maybe they don't care that you heard it and they're like, oh, they're not going to say anything. I wasn't even talking to them anyway. How does you either addressing it or not addressing it, how does that play out?
Exactly. And so our next point of discussion is going to be about privilege. And we're going to do a little bit of an activity. And so wherever you are, whether you're in your room or somewhere else or wherever you're watching this, please participate in this activity with us. It's very simple. You may have seen it on TikTok, but it's the put a finger down activity. So we're going to have everybody just put their fingers up, and this will help you kind of have a visual about privilege. So as I read a statement, if it applies to you, just put your finger down, okay? And then at the end, we'll kind of assess where we're at and what that means. So the first statement is, put a finger down if you grew up with only one parent or guardian. Put a finger down if you had to buy your own first car. Put a finger down if you had to take out loans to finish your education. Put a finger down if you had ever been called a racial slur. Put a finger down if you've been followed in a store unnecessarily. Put a finger down if someone has crossed the street in order to avoid passing you. Put a finger down if you've been accused of not being able to afford something expensive. Put a finger down if you've ever been afraid of holding your partner's hand in public because of potential persecution or a potential hate crime. This is like hard to put your fingers down. Put a finger down if you've ever had fear in your heart when being stopped by the police. Put a finger down if you have been stopped or detained by the police for no valid reason. Put a finger down if you've ever been bullied solely because of your race or sexual orientation. Put a finger down if you've ever been denied services solely based on the color of your skin. So I have 6 fingers. How many do you have, Renata?
I have none left.
You have none. So how many fingers do you have left up? Assess. How many fingers do you have left up? That's privilege. These are just a few instances, a few real life examples, and there's so many. There's so many more. Microaggressions, Renata and I do stuff on microaggressions. That could be one. Have you ever been microaggressed? There's so many other examples, but those are just a few. And so that's a real life example there for you. Activity you can have privilege with.
This is a powerful exercise for you to kind of do. You're listening to this video probably by yourself. And so it's a really powerful exercise for you to really think through what some of those statements mean, what the idea that you've never experienced some of those things mean, and all of how it plays out for you, or, just really thinking, spending some time with that introspection, like, man, it's causing me a different level of awareness. And so we just, while we can't be right in front of you, it's an important exercise to still have you go through, because it matters.
Yeah, and that could be even an activity you do with your residents as well, just to bring this to awareness for your hall. So I'm going to jump back into the slideshow, and we're going to discuss cultural competency and cultural humility, and what is the difference, and how you can incorporate that into your role. So cultural competency is kind of a myth. It's not like a real thing. There's no little Girl Scout badge that you get for being culturally competent, or having all the right answers. Renata and I, our job is literally to talk about intercultural affairs and inclusive education. That's literally our job. But there's things that Renata and I aren't cultural competent on. There's things that we don't even know. There's things that are developing as we speak that we haven't learned about yet. And so there's no final destination on that.
I think one of the really important things, and typically we start a training like this, we're in the learning space with you while we're offering this workshop opportunity, please understand that we don't always get it right. And the ability to say that I may not always get it right and be willing to be corrected in the spaces and times when you don't get it right, that's a big step. And that's a big growth opportunity to say, hey, you know what? This is a learning process. And I know that I've never arrived. I know that I will never arrive. So along that continuum, sometimes I'm in some areas of my life, I'm really far along, but then in other areas of my life, I have a lot of work to do.
Right. And this is not an excuse just to give up and say, okay, well, Tyler Renata said I can't be culturally competent, so I'm not going to do anything. No, that is not the response. The response is to, yes, educate yourself. Yes, get answers, but there's no like end. It's not like a thing that you could be like, okay, like I finished it. Still do it. Still do the research. You know, Google is a thing and we encourage you to use it. Like if you don't know, if you have a resident who comes out to you as bisexual and you're like, I don't know, I never met a bisexual person. Like, what does that mean? Google it. Or come to me. Like, I mean, either one, but do your research and don't just blow it off and say that, okay, it's not my problem. It's we're as a community, it is our problem. The alternative here is, if it will, switch. Oh, no. Okay. It's cultural humility. And that's when you're actually listening more than you're speaking. You're going to the source. You're saying, okay, like as my bisexual resident, tell me, what does that mean? What does that mean for you? What are the experiences that you've had? How can I best support you? Or one of your residents who's Muslim, what do you need from me as your RA?
First meeting somebody.
You know, what are the things that you need to be supported? So that's a little bit about kind of the mindset shift that we really want you to have in your role.
So I think also the other piece of that is, and what you just heard is, I posted something the other day and I was just quickly scrolling to see if I could find it. It says remain teachable, right? But there was a little bit more to it and I wanted to put that other piece, but my phone is going wild. But I think it's important to remain teachable and acknowledge the idea that you may not know everything. And I know memes don't run our lives, but memes really do speak to us some of the time, right? Like we can all acknowledge that. We'll be on Instagram or something and something just speaks to our soul. And that meme really spoke to my soul because I always want to remain teachable, really acknowledging that there's always more growth that I can do. And that's, I think, what cultural humility talks about a little bit as well.
Great. And so we have a short video from the University of Pittsburgh that we want to play for you about cultural humility and how they're utilizing it on their campus.
With cultural humility, the goal is to lower your own sense of self-importance, to be open to receive other people and other people's way of life, to be present, to be listening, to be open, to see.
We are all equals and we each have skills to share. You're talking about developing a partnership. I have something to give and you have something to give. And what are we going to create from that? It's not coming in as if you have all the answers because you're at the university. And I have none of the answers because I am from a minority community.
You have to be relaxed, you have to be humble, you have to come not to a lower level, but to a level that people can understand what you're saying, can understand that you want to be there. Body language is such a big thing. If you're not comfortable, then you need to go into a community with people that are comfortable so you can see how they act, what type of clothes they wear, how they speak to people.
Whether you're a professor, or whether you're a student or a staff person or whatever your station is, there may be this kind of sense, within our egos that we need to approach communities that we're working with a sense of knowing everything, of being the teacher. And in cultural humility, it's okay to not know, and it's okay to ask a question. It doesn't mean that you're not intelligent. It just means that you may not know something. So I think it's just important to approach folks who may have different social identities in that way, with a sense of openness, with a sense of listening and really seeing, listening to understand instead of listening to talk and teach, and occupying the space of being a true learner. I think that's important.
Please remember that we are all equals and we each have skills to share. So even though we may not have all of the book knowledge that a university student has, we still have a lot of knowledge and skills, and we're still moving forward. And we need assistance with moving forward. And there's probably a lot the university students could learn from us too.
So we'll get into the next slide in a minute, but I wanted to unpack that video a little bit. With what they're doing at the University of Pittsburgh, they're really engaging broadly with their community, and they're having university students be engaged with the community. And I want to encourage you to do that too. Jen Lidka and Community Service and Volunteerism are doing great things. We're doing some of our own service and community engagement, and we encourage you to do the same and getting connected and getting kind of breaking the campus bubble as well, but also using these same tools with your residents.
Yes. So the next piece, and if we were live, I would add a poll in this place. I would add a poll to ask a little bit about your understanding of anti-racism. What does that mean to you? Can you give one word about what it means to you? But since we're not live, I'll ask you all to think about it. Maybe we'll put it in the assessment form where you can ask us additional questions. But the next piece that we're going to talk about is, what does it mean to be not racist versus being anti-racist? That's a big leap. It's a big leap, but it's a necessary leap. And to be completely frank, the opposite of racism is not simply not racist. The opposite of racism is anti-racist. So yes, like we had this planned out. Put one thing you can do to be anti-racist in the chat box. And so we'll add that to the sheet. But the example that I like to give is from a book called Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria by Beverly Daniels Tatum. In the book, she details a really salient example of a moving walkway at an airport. And so I'll first acknowledge that that probably is my privilege creeping out, just to assume that everyone has been in an airport. I recognize that not everyone has actually been in an airport, so forgive that. But in the airport, she talks about the moving walkway, and at one end of the moving walkway is racism. And so racism, plain and simple, like your active racist, somebody who's not ashamed of their racism, like the cross burning, the Ku Klux Klan member, whites only, et cetera, et cetera. That's your active racist. So the moving walkway on both ends, let me step back for a second. So on one end there's racism. On the other end, there's anti-racism. And then in the middle, there's that person who says, I'm not a racist, but they are not interrupting behaviors. They are not speaking up maybe at that dinner table, maybe not speaking up in the locker room when something out of line is said, whether, and I'm speaking in terms of race, but this can be any marginalized community. Let's be very clear about that. I'm speaking in terms of race because that's the example given in the book. So that person who says, I'm not a racist, the active racist, who is the person that may be a Ku Klux Klan member, et cetera, they're moving and walking actively in the direction of racism. That passive racist, the direction of the moving walkway is going this way. They're standing still passively on the walkway saying, I'm not a racist. I'm not interrupting any behaviors. I'm not doing anything like that, but I'm not a racist. I don't hold those ideologies. Those are not okay with me, but they're just standing still. And if you stand still on the moving walkway, you ultimately end up at the same destination of the racist. That Antiracist is actively walking in the opposite direction. And so they're doing things by educating themselves. They're doing things like interrupting behaviors. They're speaking up when they see an injustice happening, and they're actively moving in the opposite direction. That's where we hope that everyone will ultimately be one day. Yes, we recognize that it takes some practice to get to that place, but we hope that we're always practicing these things, whether it's in public and with someone that you don't know, or in private, because sometimes at that Thanksgiving table, some really interesting things are said, and you might have to challenge one of your family members who you respect greatly, but they've said something that just doesn't sit well with you anymore. So that's the analogy of racist, not racist, and anti-racism.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's all about taking it a step further with that. You know, like we said, we have diversity on campus. Great. But what does the diversity mean if we're not being inclusive to the diversity? Or if we're just tolerating them? If we're like, okay, like, you know, the gay people are over there. As long as they don't come into my space or talk to me, then they're fine. That's not how this works. That's just tolerance. We want to take it a step further with acceptance. Joining the gay people at the lunch table and getting to know them and talking to them and saying, hey, like, you know, what's going on? Engaging with them, accepting them into your community, not kicking them out of your party, but inviting them to the party. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so that's it. That's another continuum that we're kind of really detailing for you, because think about how you feel if someone says that they tolerate you. Right? That just doesn't sit well with me. I never want to be tolerated. I want to be affirmed. I want to be appreciated, even beyond just accepted. I want to be included, right? Affirmed, like included, and I want to feel engaged in any community that I'm in. And so that's what we're hoping, that everybody's moving along that continuum in a really positive direction.
Yeah, if you're lactose intolerant and you go to the cafe and all they have is milk, are you still going to get the coffee? Are you still going to get the coffee and tolerate the milk? You know, if you have a bug bite or if you have a sunburn, you got to tolerate that for a little bit till it goes away. Like, that's not, you know, we're talking about acceptance here, and that's the big part of it.
Yeah.
So hopefully this presentation gives you some good baseline understanding of some of the words that we're talking about and that our office is about. I'm going to share the screen for our contact info and also give a little shout out to our Mosaic mentors.
Yes.
And always know that we're here. If you have any questions at all, our website is very simple. It's lvc.edu/OIA. And we're also on Instagram, OIA_LVC. We're also on Facebook. But this is us. This is who we are.
Yes, and so we do hope to connect with you further throughout this academic year and well beyond. We hope that we're able to speak into how intercultural affairs impact your lives, not just at LVC, but well beyond your time at LVC.
Right, and I'm just going to scroll down and give our Mosaic mentors a shout out, because they do really amazing things for our first year students and mentoring our LGBTQ and Alana first year students. So you may be seeing them around campus, and some of you may be them. I know Jaka is an RA, and a few other people are as well. So yes, and we also have some clubs too here: Asian Culture Club, Black Student Union, Freedom Rings, Latin Excellence. So check those out, and thank you for taking time out of your day or your evening or your morning or whenever it is. And always know that we're here for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.